Welcome, ladies and gents, and today we are going to talk about the true cost of freedom. So, I have a question for you. Would you say you're free? What does it mean to be free? Are you able to do what you want, as you want, when you want? If not, let's talk about it and talk about what it means to be free and how we can begin to build that for ourselves. Because a lot of times, now if you're fortunate and you live in the land of the free and the home of the brave, we're often taught freedom is access to opportunity and to be able to, have a big house, a white picket fence, 2 cars, kids, da 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 da. And even most Americans wouldn't even have that, so they wouldn't be free in that sense. But freedom is a big concept. And it's a driving force for democracy and modern day capitalism, right? But freedom, like as they say in our native land, the Americans, and for those who aren't American, glad you're listening. But something that's often said is freedom isn't free. And that is true. But what is the cost? What does freedom cost us? And today we're going to talk about just exactly that. So today, I wanted to talk about the cost of freedom, and that is joy, and that is faith, before we get here to sovereignty. And sovereignty, what that means, because this is the goal, sovereignty basically means we are able to fully embody ourselves, right? Sovereign, when someone is a sovereign, they're a royal or a leader of a land, like a king, or a queen, or a prince, or a sovereign family are the people who own that territory. And so part of sovereignty is knowing where you are as an individual, where you stand differently amongst people, but most importantly as well is understanding your own value. And how would I say, engaging with it, where you engage with your own value. Because when you do this is freedom. This is freedom at the highest level. But a lot of times when we think of freedom as the end of life, but really it's just the beginning. Because when especially those who have lots of freedom and who have tremendous amounts of power, which is what a lot of people associate with sovereignty. They think to have sovereignty is to have power or control. Some people might even say, like, freedom is a lack of responsibility, but sovereignty is ultimate responsibility for the self and for the stewardship. That's why it's closer to a king or a president than it is to say just a vagabond on the street. Because you could take someone who's like a homeless person who's on the street, they have no responsibilities, right? But would we say this person is free? And then if we take someone who's got all the power in the world, Elon Musk is the richest man in the world, would you say he's free? So this is where we start stepping into a lot of relative territory, and we have to understand that freedom is an essence of sovereignty, because this is really what we're looking for, is sovereignty, which is this ultimate self-stewardship, so the ultimate stewardship of self and for those who fall under our responsibility. And it's not having ultimate power, ultimate control, but it's the capacity to direct your life. And also the energy to do it. So if you're sick and let's say you're rich, but you're sick and overweight and you're lonely all the time because you're hindered, would you say this is free? You would argue probably not. And this is why we start here with joy and with faith. Because before you understand what brings you joy in life, and before you can understand what you believe in and what your values are, you cannot experience sovereignty. It's impossible. So in order to do this, we have to pay the cost of this first. And today we're going to talk about a framework to approach that. Now, sovereignty is just the third level of a 7-step program to total and complete self-mastery, so to speak, right? Stephen Covey codified these in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. They exist as the 7 Hermetic Principles. There's a lot of values of 7, but basically there's just 7 levels of reality, right? And the level of law, this is a really important saying, the level of law which you obey, the level of law one obeys dictates one's reality. So whatever you're listening to, if you want to say, what kind of life am I listening to? What kind of life am I living? Pay attention to how you feel. Identify how you feel. Identify your thoughts. And then look at your actions and your environment. And this will dictate the level of law which you are living. And based off that level of law, that is your reality. And so if you want to change that, you first have to change how you feel. You have to change your thoughts. And then through that, your actions. And then through that, your environment will change. And it needs to be done in this order. If you can try and interrupt or do the actions first, but if you haven't changed the underlying thoughts or the underlying feeling that is operating that, the change won't be sustained and you won't actually change your reality. You'll just fall right back into your old pattern. So this is now where we're going to talk a lot about the energetics of this and what this looks like. Because in order to understand this, you guys have got to understand, everybody wants to believe that psychology and life and everything is like super complex when it's really not. There's actual viable mechanics that operate how people move in this world. And the people who understand that and master that achieve incredible success most of the time. Some people believe it's luck, but most of the people, especially the ones who do it, know that it's not. For me and my personal journey, how I came to do that, how I came to understand that, was there was a time when I was flat broke and I really needed to make more money, but I wasn't able to get a job for whatever reason. So I took this awful sales job that nobody wanted. And at first I thought to myself, I'm a black guy knocking door to door, and I was in a majority white place where there's just a lot of white people. And I thought to myself, oh my God, these people aren't going to listen to me because like I'm this black guy trying to sell. And what was interesting is during that process, I committed to myself that, you know what, regardless of whatever this being a disadvantage, that I'm going to try and make it work. But then what was very interesting is that the first week I was terrible. I was completely trashed. But then the second week I did a little bit better. And then the third week I was actually making enough that I could get paid by commission instead of my low hourly wage. And by my 4th and 5th weeks, I had made more money than I'd ever made in my entire life. And after 3 months of working at that job, I was the highest paid employee in the entire company. And what was interesting, and this is a really cool fact, is I was the number 1 sales rep, but I was working half as many hours as everybody else. And when I went, and at first I thought, oh, sales is random. It's like, I don't know what's going on. But it was very interesting. As I did it, I began to see that people typically fall into patterns and that there's a pattern behind anything. And when I tried to show this pattern while teaching, I remember standing up in front of everybody and kind of telling them my secret or whatever. And what was very interesting is that my boss, after all that, he said, everybody, you know what Oni's real advantage is? And I was like, well, what is it? And he was like, it's because he's black. And then I thought to myself that what I was once telling myself was my weakness and the reason I couldn't succeed was now the reason other people thought I was. And that's when I realized life is not luck, it's a choice. And so let's talk about what that looks like and what the underlying mechanics of that are after that story time. So there are 7 degrees of law, and in order to understand freedom, we have to operate from a basic third degree model. The third degree model basically is 3 laws with 3 steps that encompass the entire model. If a model can't break it down into 3 models very sufficiently, it's not a third degree model. It's not a very good one. Now, the best one to codify being that I found so consistently has been to be spirit, mind, and body. Because this is, as human beings, how we are built and essentially we operate. Now, you could argue that the same thing exists within reality, right? So you could call this reality me. Then you have the spiritual me, which is my emotions, my mental me, which is my thoughts, and then my physical me, which is my actions, okay? Now, and then you could actually say environment as well, or just my life as we see it. Okay, so in order to get freedom, right, we have to know and understand what joy means. We need to know what joyous thoughts look like. And then from that, we need to have joyous actions. Just actions right here. I already have it written down. What do you know? And then from that, we need to ask ourselves, what does faith feel like? And then what does faithful thoughts look like? And then from there, what do faithful actions look like? What's interesting is that once you take care of these 2, this will naturally follow. You will naturally follow once you've been able to identify it, but you have to be able to feel into it first, because it's important. The reason oftentimes when we try to force actions without feeling is we are not able to get the juice and the energy needed. And so it's super important that even in the smallest crack or moments that we can find it. And oftentimes, if we're really struggling to find this, it's because on the scale of on the Hawkins scale, we're so far down. By the way, this is the Hawkins scale of vibration. I've mentioned it in like all my videos, so just keep watching. But basically, on the emotional scale, if we find that joy and faith are inaccessible to us down here, then we have to take the idea of, if I feel shame or apathy, where I just feel empty, that's fine. But then we have to say, well, what's the next feeling? After that, that's fear. After that, that's anger. After that, pride. And then eventually, you move into courage. And what's interesting is as you take these steps towards courage, and then through courage, you go into neutrality, you go into willingness, you go into reasoning, and then finally you get acceptance. Now, once you get into these emotions, now you've starting to move towards joy. And then as you start making these emotions, you're going to start having thoughts that are going to do that. And then you're going to have actions that align with it. But remember, while you're still feeling all these emotions, if you're like, I am free, but you're still racked with fear or racked with apathy, you're not free. That is not what freedom is. Freedom is not having lots of money. Freedom is not having, no responsibility. It starts with, do I even feel joy and do I feel faithful? And can I live and sit within that? Because if you don't have that, then can we argue that you're free? This is why this aspect of reality, the 2% of the environment and our body, is not an indicator of the reality we live. We see that all the time where there are people who seem to have everything they want and then they go kill themselves because even though their environment and their actions told you on the outside, the surface, that, well, that person would be free. If I had that, I feel great. But the thing is, you weren't paying attention because it's not the actions that matter. It's what is their thinking. And most importantly, what are they feeling? Because this is reality. Most of reality is spirit, and a lot of people get twisted up in that. And this is why so much of life doesn't make sense. And then we're so confused because we look at actions, the environment, and circumstances to tell us our thoughts, and then we let those tell us our feelings, when in reality, it is reverse. The feelings start first. People start wars not because things happen to them, then they get those thoughts, and then they feel that way. What happens is they feel that way, they have those thoughts, they do those things. That then reverses into the emotions, and it feeds back on itself. And so in order to interrupt that, we have to, like the basic standard 3 steps, identify how you feel and where you are on the scale. Make a decision and start moving up the scale emotionally. And you might be like, what does that mean? Whatever you need to do to start feeling higher up the emotion, move up that scale. So if you're in fear, try to feel angry. If you're angry, try to feel prideful. If you're prideful, you need to start feeling courageous. If you're feeling courageous, move towards willingness. If you're willing, move towards acceptance. Because what happens is once you start getting into acceptance, and then you move past acceptance and you forgive and you let things go, then you start feeling joy. Then you start feeling love. Then you start feeling peace. And then and only then can you start saying you are free. Because then you know what that feels like. And then from that place of freedom internally, in the spirit, you can then start making decisions with your thoughts that move you towards freedom. And then through that will come the actions, and then eventually your body and environment will conform to this reality. Because that is the law you are living. Because you are living the law of joy, peace, and love, which is 3rd degree law. But if you're still stuck down here, you're probably not living by this model. The way you're living is probably with a model of reality where it's like my life is dictated by politicians or some distant God who doesn't know or care about me and that I have to plead and beg for them to listen to me, or some church religion. You're probably living a model that was built on its very basis to take your power away. Now, I'm not saying that these things aren't real. Politicians are real, God is definitely real, and churches are real. But we have to ask ourselves, what is the model of life that we're living at? Because especially if we start seeing this and knowing who we are, the true I am, we understand that this is God. God is spirit. And so if you say, I believe in God, then you need to understand spirit is 80% of your reality. And if you do not understand or look at reality that way, you cannot say you believe in God. A lot of people say they believe in God, when really they believe in money. They believe in prestige because they're so focused on the things of this world, the environment around them. They're focused on the 2% of reality. And that's why everything is confusion and complexity. Okay? So in order to truly free ourselves, we have to start in the heart, the spirit of the matter. And to do that, we have to identify how we feel. Then we need to move and set ourselves upon joy and peace, or set yourselves on love or peace. And then from there, follow what you learn. So if there's a lead, if someone says for you to do something, or something comes for you, that's the energy you need to follow on. So you need to identify how you feel, set yourself up to move up the scale, commit to that, and then follow what you learn. Follow the actions, do what is necessary. And those are the 3 basic laws. If you do that, you will find freedom. It is inevitable. It's the mechanics. Just like how I was able to go from being broke, not knowing what I was doing, to being the highest paid rep in my company on half the time. Because there are mechanics to it. And it's not just sales, it's not just writing a book, it's in everything. There are mechanics to this. And the mechanics are spirit, mind, body. If you do it in that order, not only will it succeed, I promise you will find what you were looking for. Now, if you want support in being able to implement the third degree and other models more sufficiently in your life and to understand the Universal Codex more fully, hit me down in the link below and set up a time so we can set up a free strategy session and I can help you out with whatever you need. Comment down below if you have any questions and you want to understand more about what we're talking about here, specifically with the Universal Codex. And guys, like and subscribe, working to build the channel, and I hope that you're taking care of yourself, right? Stay happy, stay blessed, and stay free. Peace.